Chuck, which two U.S. cities are home to the most freelancers?
That is an excellent question, Max, and we will find that out at the end of the episode.
G-Train to Church Avenue, next stop Classen Avenue. Stay clear, close door.
Welcome to the Urban Files, a show that provides news and analysis on a variety of city-related topics. How we live, work, and play, and move around in the cities we love. Join your hosts, Max and Chuck, as they cover the latest news from the American urban landscape. So, Max, what all have you been up to of late?
Hey, Chuck. Last month we took our kids on their first cruise. It was 1 week traversing the Western Caribbean. We had an awesome time. Kids had a blast. But my takeaway from the experience is that cruising, at least in the Caribbean, is the worst way to travel. I mean, talking about authentic travel, like immersing yourself in different cultures, getting out into nature, visiting unique tourist sites. These are all things that you will experience minimally at best on a cruise.
Yeah. You know? And I think to your point, like, not only do these cruises not offer that, but in some ways they take away from that landscape that's already there. I mean, you just kind of, you get there and there's a big tourist island and it seems to separate from the actual place. And so there's people that really, they go on these cruises and they're not seeing anything beyond what they would in their regular lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We went to 4 ports, and honestly, we might as well have just gone to the same little tourist village every time because they were all identical. I've never been on one, but I imagine like a river cruise through historic European cultural centers, you know, or to like bustling port cities of Asia or something like that. Those could yield a more rewarding travel experience. But in those cases, I feel like you're seeing and experiencing a lot less than you should be for such enriching travel destinations. You know, it's just a bit more limiting than it needs to be. So
I would agree. I think, I mean, ultimately, I think that you were blessed with great company on your travel. But apart from that, it's,
So what about you, Chuck?
So I am really into a home stretch of work and school. So in my teaching right now, I've got IEPs left and right. I have like the end of the year coming up. I'm working on my paper, so it's just non-stop. But I had a really nice spring break, and I got to go to kind of the middle of America. I got to go to Austin for a cousin's wedding, and then also to Dallas.
Okay, cool. 2 nice cities in Texas.
Yeah. And so it's a place that I feel like people go all the time to the coastal cities, New York or San Francisco. It's been like, even Austin in a way has more, but like people really don't just go to a place like Dallas. And so it was, you know, I felt like I was seeing a lot of like really treasure stuff, like seeing Fair Park with their Art Deco architecture and the landscape around that, and just really seeing a place like Dallas that has struggled so much with sprawl and everything. But you could tell there's committed people there that are trying to up the quality of life factor and the comfort, and there really are a lot of interesting things there that are underrated, and I think people should check out.
Yeah, for sure. I think Dallas gets overshadowed a little bit, but you're right. Like, I was blown away my first time in the city as an adult, and seeing all the neighborhoods that are coming up, all the infill, good startup scene. I mean, a lot of different things happening that you wouldn't really hear about, and definitely Austin kind of gets the focus when it comes to that. So, yeah.
It was a good time, you know. I mean, it was quick, but it was definitely, it was a good trip.
Awesome. Well, we're going to take a quick break now, but please stick around. When we come back, Chuck and I will talk about some news that seems to have captivated much of the country's attention and imagination this past year. And in doing so, it's created some rather polarizing viewpoints. Hi, this is Max, one of your hosts on the Urban Files. I want to thank you for listening and let you know that if you're interested in the type of discussions we have on the show, please also check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, where we share more content like this. Just head to facebook.com/theurbanfiles and you'll find links to the rest of our social media. Thanks again, and back to the show. Thanks for hanging around. So our first topic for our very first show is going to be what was likely the biggest news story we will have on our first season of this podcast. I mean, even if you've been living under a rock at the bottom of the ocean, you probably know that Amazon spent most of 2018 searching for a site to build a second, supposedly equal headquarters to their original headquarters in Seattle. This entire thing was dubbed HQ2, like some futuristic sci-fi phenomenon. And in the end, Amazon surprised everyone by selecting two winners. One site in New York City, just outside of Manhattan. That's the Long Island City site. Another site in the Washington, D.C. region, right outside the city limits, and that was Crystal City. Then, in an actually surprising turn of events, a vocal opposition of politicians, union reps, and community leaders managed to push back so hard that Amazon reversed course and decided to bail on its New York City, Long Island City plans. So, simple question, Chuck. With Amazon packing up, leaving town, and taking with it purportedly tens of thousands of high-paying jobs and billions of dollars of investment, is this good or bad for Long Island City, New York City, and its citizens?
So my immediate thought is it really was a huge missed opportunity for New York City. Not only would it add 25,000 employees and jobs, and it would be a significant work presence in that area, but also you're attracting a big four technology company. New York City has long been known as one of the world leaders for many, many things, but they aren't considered one of the tech hubs. When you think of that, you think of San Francisco, you think of Seattle. Right. And so this is their opportunity to jump in, and they did not get to be the center of that. So long term, it's a question of, okay, are other tech companies ever going to follow? What's going to happen now? On the other side of the coin, I do think that it may have been a win for the blue-collar residents in the immediate area surrounding there. Now, Queens is probably, from an international residence perspective, New York's most diverse borough. So there's residents of all ethnicities. Many moved there just because they came from the airport, and that is right near where the airport is. So in that sense, many of them may not have been working for Amazon, and they may have been pushed out. But overall, I still think that it will have a negative impact for the city's status as like a world leader, because if you aren't able to, if you push back on business, which New York City's always been pro-business, I wonder how this will affect things for them moving forward.
Right. I think it's easy to see both sides of this debate, that the economic benefits should have been pretty obvious, but at the same time, no question, the concerns of the citizens immediately on the ground is absolutely warranted. I think there should have been a way, with so much at stake, to find some common ground and creative ways to alleviate these issues. And ultimately, it should have been a big net positive for the region. So I wanted to just paraphrase real quick Robert Mujica, the New York budget director, in his open letter that he wrote days after Amazon's decision to back out, because I think it sums up this point well. He said that, paraphrasing, "We assume the benefits to be evident. 25,000 to 40,000 jobs located in a part of Queens that has not seen any significant commercial development in decades, and a giant step forward in the tech sector, further diversifying our economy. Incredibly, I have heard city and state elected officials claim that Amazon was getting $3 billion in government subsidies that could have been better spent on housing or transportation. And this is either a blatant untruth or a fundamental ignorance. The city and state gave Amazon nothing. Amazon was to build their headquarters with union jobs and pay the city and state $27 billion in revenue. And the city and state, through tax credits, would provide up to $3 billion in tax relief. If Amazon created the 25,000 to 40,000 jobs and thus generated $27 billion in revenue," end quote.
And that's a very solid contribution there. I mean, the logic of the $3 billion, that's just surely they're going to be paying more taxes by being in New York City. That's part of that revenue is not something that New York City is just going to have and give them. So that was really a fundamental thing that was misunderstood by many in the area. So I guess really what I'm thinking is it kind of makes it like a landmark case in just that, not that it's the first chance that a company has had to do a relocation process like this, but that it was so much of a kind of, I hesitate to say PR fiasco, but Amazon acted like they were going to move there. And then of course it kind of fell through on them. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are on how companies will move forward in similar situations, or if there will be another HQ2 process.
Well, first of all, yes, there has seemed to have been a lot of backlash. It was surprising to me, the amount of it. Among our peer group of urbanists who follow this type of city news closely, and I guess a smattering of it here and there amongst like concerned citizens who are sick and tired of corporate bailouts, corporate subsidies, tax breaks for yet another multinational company that doesn't need it, you know. But honestly, to me, there was really nothing different or groundbreaking about this entire process, aside from it being public and somewhat transparent. I mean, this zero-sum, winner-take-all competition pitting cities against each other in a sort of race to the bottom, I guess, has been happening for decades. And it's not going to change just because of HQ2. Unless we finally reach a tipping point where all cities buy into the idea that long-term this isn't beneficial or sustainable at all, then perhaps at that point we see some kind of a shift. But make no mistake, Amazon doing this publicly, involving over 200 cities, comprising, I don't know, over half of the US and Canadian population, I'm guessing, certainly drew more ire and more attention to this dilemma than any other previous, usually private and often, in fact, confidential process. But I just don't think we are in a place where there will be any lasting implications from all of this. Most of the people who are upset and outraged have moved on or have lost their platform and spotlight.
Well, that's a good point, because I mean, both Amazon and New York City are two entities that are too big to fail, I feel like, in a situation like this. So even if there was some negative press for either one on this, people are still going to want to do business in New York City, and people are still going to use Amazon. They're still gradually taking over the world right now, it seems like. You are right about the corporate process. I mean, many cities have varying attitudes on this, from ambivalence about companies moving in to doing everything in their power. Dallas actually just secured another Fortune top 10 company in McKesson, which is a major healthcare provider, and they moved there from San Francisco. And it's just a question of, are cities that sell out to the companies, or not to use the word sell out, but just do everything in their power to attract them, are things truly better for a place like that with that many headquarters? And I guess there's no perfect answer. I guess in some ways yes, and in some ways no. But overall, I think you're right in that things are still probably going to continue more similarly than any type of windfall or anything. Taking us into our next question about Brightline. That's another huge issue, because right now Richard Branson, the head of Brightline, has announced that they received funding to extend the train from where it's currently situated in West Palm Beach all the way up to Orlando. And even the more recent news is that Richard Branson plans to extend the train from here over to Tampa. So with this happening as it is, I guess the question is, do you think this will work, and what things do you think they might need to do in order to be successful?
I'll back up for a second and clarify the setting in which Brightline came into existence. Brightline began as a subsidiary of Florida East Coast Industries. Known at the time as All Aboard Florida, Brightline was intended to be a private high-speed rail service between Miami and Orlando. And along this high-traffic, highly visible corridor, that parent company, Florida East Coast Industries, just happened to own fully operational railroad track along most of the path. Yeah. They would still have to make significant upgrades to the rails. They'd have to work out agreements and scheduling around all of the freight traffic and build their stations, of course. But basically, bottom line is they already owned most of the right-of-way. They already had operational railroad track most of the way. And most importantly, they owned lots of developable land that would be quite valuable if all of a sudden there were hundreds of thousands of passengers passing through every year, right? So understanding this context, recognizing that Brightline's success is dependent on its ridership, but not necessarily on passenger fares, is key to analyzing its likelihood of success. Miami Central, their grand, like a downtown Miami station, was built on land already owned by them. So they have this massive, grandiose development project that is suddenly viable because of their planned rail system. They had to acquire land for their other South Florida stations, but I believe they got good rates, below market deals with their leverage. You can look at what's going on on the Treasure Coast right now, where there are multiple towns that were fighting tooth and nail against even allowing Brightline to operate. And now they're vying with each other to have a station. So anyway, yeah. So for the sake of this question, suppose that success is defined as actually expanding to Tampa, like you mentioned, and eventually to Jacksonville. And if success is whether they actually build out that network within the state of Florida, I'm going to bet yes. And I should note also that when I mentioned Jacksonville, they have that same advantage in that they already have fully operational railroad track all the way between South Florida and Jacksonville. So yeah, with that in mind, I'll say yes to success. I don't know what that means for their actual financial projections, but as far as them completing the state network, I'd put my money on that eventually happening the next decade. So.
Absolutely. It would be good for the state and the region moving forward for that to happen. I think one of the things that they really need to focus on is who are our target audiences. Now, as far as specific business relationships between Orlando and Miami, it's not so much like the Northeast Corridor where you're going to have people traveling for that all the time. That's something that could grow, and there is some pursuit of already. But I think tourist is really where they're going to thrive. Florida already has, I think, over 100 million tourists over the past few years, and the number has been increasing. And so I think with two nationally prime tourism destinations such as Miami Beach and its beaches and the Orlando area, and not only that, but all the international tourists there, I think marketing it is going to be crucial to them. And so if they can have a station over by Disney World and by the airport as they're talking about, I think that would be very helpful to the movement. And I think then offering some sort of package deals where you get people to ride and fill up a train or offering some discount for a group going like that, I think offering that level of initial subsidy might pay long-term benefits with its viability.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the tourist train moniker has been thrown around both for advocates and detractors, But yeah, it's definitely going to be a market that Richard Branson even has mentioned that he's trying to capture with people coming in through the Virgin Airlines and then taking the Virgin trains. I guess we should get used to calling it Virgin trains now.
Virgin trains, yes.
And hopping from the plane to the train to his Virgin cruise ships out at Port Miami, which is another extension that they've mentioned, as well as Fort Lauderdale Airport, which also serves the cruise port in Fort Lauderdale. So, I mean, you just have all of these connections for tourists as well. I think they need to find the right balance to serve all of those markets. What about you, Chuck? What do you think about this plan? And has this worked similarly elsewhere? Is there any precedent that you would point to?
So I think probably the closest precedent in the U.S., of course, is the Acela Express line, which is, of course, that is associated with Amtrak, which does run trains, it should be noted, as you mentioned, throughout. Like, if you go to Tampa, you can ultimately catch a train up to the Northeast right now. It's just not on as advanced a system, and it really hasn't received a lot of innovation in decades and decades. So I think that the precedent is that people are going to want to ride something that's a quality product, like for example, with something like Virgin Trains, you can get from Washington, D.C. to New York in 2 hours if you take it at the right time. And so I don't know what the max speed of this is. I know they're still working out a lot of the details with that, but with how bad traffic in Florida can get, especially in certain times and around like what it might continue to be, I think this could eventually be the most efficient option for tourists and for visit and even for locals in the future. So I would also kind of look to sort of what Megabus has done, just kind of going in a different direction there, how they kind of do the initial fare that's cheaper and then you kind of build up from there to kind of get the demand, you get people in on it. And so that might be, you kind of, again, you just market it and focus to your groups that you're like, who is your audience? Because it's not for everyone. It's not going to be, the car is still going to be dominant in Florida for the immediate coming decades. But at least if they figure out who their niches are, it might be something to build on in terms of turning a profit.
It's interesting that you say that. My impression of Virgin Trains is that they're definitely trying to bring sort of a higher level of service and class to train travel that doesn't really exist in the U.S. So, it's that kind of luxury in a sense. That you'll find in other countries. Acela Express would be sort of the only thing that could somewhat compare. It's a higher price ticket and is catered to business travelers. So I think that type of experience is what they're going after. But perhaps like similar to what Megabus did, they can kind of capture the market by offering good value, and in that way kind of grow their market share and then kind of be a major presence. Yes, so this is kind of stepping outside the country, but I was thinking the Hong Kong MTR is another good example because they're actually sort of a model that a lot of other cities have looked to, in the sense that Hong Kong has this property plus system where their transit authority also owns all of that real estate around all of their stations and actually makes a lot of money through its leases with all of the restaurants and shops that pay top dollar to be right where these, I don't know, tens of thousands of people are walking through every few hours.
That makes sense.
So
to your point about the Hong Kong system, I mean, transit-oriented development is something that they were really a pioneer in, but it's a good point because they have all that land. And so why not, people are coming through, they might want to get something to eat on the way. And you probably even have like a historic train station. I know a lot of cities, or even in the case of Miami's, I know they have like a new food hall, I think, that they have planned attached to that downtown station. And so I think that can be another source of revenue, and it also can be a marketing source for getting people to take the ride. So that's a fantastic point.
Okay. So our next segment is the relocation conversation.
All right.
I'm going to turn that into a jingle.
Relocation conversation. We're relocating. Relocation conversation. We're conversating.
From City Data, we have a user named TYDN Shop who wrote about wanting to leave not beloved home state of Utah. So he says, my wife and I hate Utah. This place sucks. It's either meth or Mormons, no offense, and we're over it. We are looking for somewhere the direct opposite of Utah, pretty much, besides scenery. We do own a home here, which we will most likely use as an income source when we leave. My wife and I have both traveled a lot, both in and out of the country, but we just can't decide where to move. We're 27, white, working on a kid, and make our living selling items online. He goes on to mention a few of the things that they dislike: the church, crime, weed restrictions, lack of diversity, lack of walkability, lack of quality food. And by the way, I'm going to assume that they aren't in Salt Lake City. I've heard much better things about Salt Lake City than what.
It sounds unlikely.
And he mentions looking for things like food, coffee, old buildings, parks, bike paths, walkability, recreational marijuana, normal gun laws. He mentions a housing budget of $300K in a decent neighborhood, and preferably mountains, nothing flat, no deserts. So anyway, and I should say he also mentions Portland, Denver, or maybe somewhere outside of Seattle as his best options. So what do you guys think? Thanks so much for any advice, is how he wraps up. What do you think, Chuck?
So I think that he really spells it out that he does not like Utah. That's like just from the beginning.
Right.
Marijuana, I mean, like the themes there are pretty consistent. He wants mountains. He wants recreational marijuana. So that it kind of spells out where our places can be a little bit, although of course more and more states are becoming open on that.
Right.
So my first thought is actually of Olympia, Washington. No, not Olympia, Tacoma, I'm sorry.
Okay, yeah.
For that is Seattle is very difficult to find a place where it is under 300, and really Portland and Denver even too. In today's home market, that's a tough ask for where you're going to want to be. But Tacoma is kind of a place that doesn't necessarily have the traditionally most hyped reputation, but at the same time, it's super close to Seattle. You do get the value that I think they're looking for, and I think there's mountains close enough, and I think really just culturally, it's going to be a better fit for what this guy seems to be looking for. I don't know if it will have exactly what he needs, but I think it does kind of go more in that direction.
Yeah, no, it's a good option. It makes sense. I agree that the real estate is going to be a big question mark in those places, although they fit quite well for his other desires. For me, I kind of took a blunt approach, pun intended. There are only 8 states in the U.S. that are broadly considered gun-friendly, shall-issue states, and that have also legalized recreational marijuana. And of those 8 states, 2 of them are on his must-avoid list that he mentioned. And another one is Alaska, which, I won't wholesale disregard Alaska, but I think in general we can assume if somebody doesn't mention it, then they're not really considering.
Pretty far out there.
So, of course, he mentioned Denver, Portland, Seattle, like you said. And since they're already on his radar, I'm going to kind of go the other direction and suggest the other 2 states, specifically the cities of Portland, Maine, and Burlington, Vermont. The tricky part, again, is real estate. With Portland and Burlington, the median home prices are right around $300K. So I feel like there might be a chance that he could find something in a great neighborhood at those prices. I just looked up today Burlington, and in the old North End and around downtown, there's properties in the $300K, a little over $300K range. And from what I can tell, those locations are decent enough, and the neighborhoods definitely do offer the character that they're seeking. They could even go up a little bit. There were some duplexes in the $400K range. They could get help from rental income to cover the mortgage if that's what they wanted to do. So definitely there. Portland was a little bit more bleak. There's not really any inventory of detached housing, or at least it's far lower inventory. So at their price point, they're really looking at a few condos or around Oakport in the West End and East End within their price range, but definitely no single family or detached houses. So I'll go with Burlington, Vermont. I definitely think Denver, Portland, Seattle are also good options. But Burlington's just another one to toss on the radar. It'll come up short, perhaps, with like the diversity that they're hoping to find. But you're never going to find everything in one place. So this one hits on a lot of their points and place to check out.
And I think that's a really thorough response. And I really mean, like, the fact that you're able to find all that information on the real estate, that was interesting to kind of find like the individual neighborhoods and kind of what they're feeling. I mean, I've heard good things about the North End. I think 2 other points, like adding to your point about Burlington as well, is for one thing, compared to his places on the East Coast, it's going to be greener. I mean, of course, not during winter, but it's just generally going to be kind of more of a lush place. Like Denver, for instance, he's going to have a lot of the same problems he had wherever he was in Utah, even though it's, it's not a desert, but it's not there. And then there's a lot of character. And I think the last point too is, since you like cities and you like such places, with Burlington, you're just a hop, skip, and a jump from Montreal, which is really one of the most like diverse, large, bustling cities in the entire, in all of North America. And so even if Burlington sometimes gets a little too slow for him, anytime he wants, really, even just for a weekend evening, he can go swing up there and partake in whatever else, including the recreational marijuana.
Right. Yeah, that's true. We could have really looked at any place just by the border. Real Estate IQ is number 1 in deal finding and is the premier real estate investment software in Texas. Trusted by over 5,000 active investors, Real Estate IQ offers thousands of dollars worth of motivated seller leads for a fraction of the price. The company is expanding to Georgia and Florida and is seeking enthusiastic partners to join and help explode the business. Visit their website at www.realestateiq.co for more information.
Welcome back, everyone, for our final segment, and it is the answer to our trivia question, which is, which 2 U.S. cities have the most freelancers? Now, I think, Max, one of the thoughts that comes to mind for me is, what is a freelancer being defined as? But a strong guess here for me, to start off with, might be Nashville, just because I think music, and I think about the informality of the scene there, and how easy it is to really become a freelancer at that level.
Yeah, that's true. Remember that this one is not per capita.
Interesting. Okay, I think that changes my thinking some. Yes.
So this is this question was sent from my wife again. She said clearly on there that this is absolute numbers, not per capita for freelancers. So yeah, I mean, for me, the first thought obviously is to go to the largest cities and then and try to narrow it down from there. But it's hard to move past New York, especially nowadays with the gig economy. I think gig workers fall into the category of freelancers, and you're going to have tons of them in all the major cities. So it's hard for me to look past New York. I would think it has to be one of the top two.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, like the first place my mind went after you said straight up size per capita was Los Angeles, and being that it is considered like one of the creative capitals of the world in that regard. But I guess I also wasn't thinking about it from a broad economic standpoint. New York has so many people in that gig economy that are involved with, many moving parts. And so that element of what that is to be a freelancer is much more broad today than it even was 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's true. It's true. LA is a good guess as well. For the reasons you cited. I think any major city is going to have a lot of gig workers, but then on top of that, you add all the creative freelancers, musicians, artists, and etc. And that's not a bad guess. I'm sad that we're just basically going number 1 and 2 in terms of city size. Before I look at the answer, any chance Chicago creeps up there?
It's possible, I think, only for the sake that Chicago is a more affordable city and market. And so maybe the real number of creatives there. And also if we're talking city versus metro, how are we, that would be the other thing that could potentially make a case for Chicago there.
Yeah. Well, I'm with you, but according to my wife's answer, this is a study from Fiverr. And they say New York and Los Angeles hold the number 1 and 2 positions.
That makes sense. Yeah.
So yeah, I guess that one wasn't too tricky, but still interesting to discuss.
Yes. So have a good one, everyone.
Yeah, there you have it.